Hey guys, it's Matt. I want to thank Cameron for sending me an email, bringing this to my attention, and then brilliantly relating what happened during World War I, to today's mask. And there's absolutely a relationship. I want to talk about that, bring you guys up to speed if you don't know what these white feathered girls or white feathered women of World War I was all about, or white feather society, and then relate that to a more general conversation on propaganda, how they have been masters of propaganda for a long time, and now they have a tool, a weaponized tool called the internet that is 100 million times more powerful than anything they ever had access to back in the day. So for anybody struggling, let's start with the basics, meaning you have no idea what I'm talking about with these white feather girls. Neither did I. So basically, it was described that groups of women, mostly in the UK, or I guess around London, would shame men into going off to fight in World War I by basically very aggressively coming up to them and, as you see here, poking a feather into their pocket or pinning a feather on them or somehow trying to get a feather into one of their pockets or lodged to them somehow. Very aggressive. I knew nothing about this. And this is from opendemocracy.net. This is the first article we'll go through. Let me read this in case you're driving or you can't. It's a picture. It's an old picture of a sketch of a young lady like approaching a man on the street in a top hat and a suit and kind of poking a feather into his pocket and trying to shame him to going off to fight in World War I, the White Feather Society. So it says here, suddenly, producing a large white feather, she jabbed it into his waistcoat, and in another tone, fierce and scornful, she added, "You coward, why don't you enlist?" Now, guys, before we go any further, let's get right into what we like discussing or what fascinates us as reality junkies. As usual, there's very little organic or natural going on here. These people, or whatever these creatures are the masters of propaganda. Very little in this regard, very little in any regard about any aspect of how the world works, any aspect of how society works is natural, organic, coming about naturally. It's puppeteers with, I don't know, 1 million fingers on each hand and 1 million strings on each finger. So I'm sure they convinced groups of women that this was the right thing to do, that they should shame these men on the streets that were not, decided to just be pacifists and to go to work and to not want to be in the muddy trenches of World War I. I'm sure there would have been some groups of women who, if one of them got the idea to do this, they could have gotten some people to do this. But the extent of this, when you research this, I can't believe I've never heard of it, because when you research it, it seems like it was a big thing that everybody would have known about living in the UK at that time. And this is all their propaganda. I'm saying that if, I don't know, there's no count on how many women stuffed feathers to shame people to go fight. Let's say they got, in total, around London and in the UK, in the big cities, in Manchester, wherever, let's say they got 5,000 women to at least do this once. Who knows? I have no idea. But I'm saying, out of those 5,000 women, if it wasn't for the Edward Bernays propaganda campaign of this system convincing them to do this sort of thing, it would have been 500 women instead of 5,000. So talk about propaganda in general, and then again, Cameron related this back to the shaming. What do we have now? The shaming of the mask, although most masks aren't white, or many are. So maybe there's a relationship there. But let me just go down and find another image here, guys, for those watching as a video. It says here, women of Britain, and this is one of the propaganda posters, and we're going to get into the propaganda posters in a moment. Women of Britain say go. What is it down here? It says, and shows soldiers marching off to World War I, and they of course, this system that exists now would have existed then. It would have used whatever tools available at its disposal to get people to go off and fight, of course, in the name of patriotism. And this says here, this propaganda poster, remember Belgium, buy bonds, Fourth Liberty Loan. Shows a shadow figure of a German soldier. You can tell from the helmet. It looks like running off with a little girl to, do something very nasty, and the Belgium, I guess, burning in the background. Remember Belgium. So, guys, they're such experts at this sort of propaganda. No major war came about naturally without them cooking up all sides or both sides. And they probably sit back with their feet up and just literally they probably did it then, they do it now, just shake their heads going, like, it's just, they probably say to themselves, it's so easy to get these people to do what we want them to do. In the case of World War I, whoever came up with the initial spark of it maybe got a verbal beatdown in one of the meetings around the Cherrywood table in the Illuminati Control Center at Chernobyl. The back room there, the Chernobyl Control Center, probably got a verbal beatdown saying, you thought shooting one archduke, a guy that nobody liked, you thought that would get 7 or 8 countries to go into war? It's like, that ain't working. And people are generally applauding the fact that Ferdinand was taken out by, Mauricio Princip eating a sandwich. Literally, he was eating a sandwich. And this is a real story. He missed him the first time. Then instead of fleeing for his life and thinking everybody would be out to get, he went to get a sandwich, like the French version of a po' boy. And then the Archduke came right by him again. Second time. So then he said, oh my gosh, put the sandwich down and killed him. Yeah, right. So, whoever came up with that idea said, this ain't working. So we need all sorts of different propaganda to go get people to fight a war that nobody wants to fight. There's absolutely no reason to fight. Then they learned their lesson in World War II. Oh, we don't want to make that mistake again, they said. We're going to cook up everything on all sides. Oh, we need a real boogeyman this time. Not like that. We just thought everybody go to war over that Archduke Ferdinand thing. For World War II, we need a real hardcore pipe-hitting boogeyman. A real asshole. There's this, and that doesn't mean it's an act, guys, or anything like that. I mean, my take on it, the puppeteers are so sophisticated that they can, well, who's apt to get out of control and to do things that we want? Well, there's this is real asshole named Adolf, and they started working with him, in my opinion. That he didn't just come about in 36 or 37, and there's this whole political career starting in 32, 33, 34. They had their eye on him for a long time. I'm just saying, he doesn't have to be in on it. See, that's what's the evil genius about this system. He doesn't have to be in on it. Adolf doesn't have to be in on it. Played Saddam Hussein, played to do the bidding of this one world system that's always been here. It's incredible how they do business. But you can see that they didn't have the boogeyman for World War I. And they needed, I guess, they needed even more death for World War II. So they created a real boogeyman. And then the Japanese were created, turned into boogeymen too, baited into the war. Let's talk about that some other time. Let's go to Spartacus-educational.com, where there's more propaganda right in the paper. They didn't have the internet to work with, or people trying to merge with their phones, which makes the mind control easy and going right past their alpha waves and their theta waves, getting into the deep corners of their brain. All they had was like magazines and papers, and but this is the Edward Bernays and those people, that probably all stems from Sigmund Freud to cook up this propaganda. So the clipping here says, to the young women of London, is your, quote, best boy wearing khaki? That's, the khaki, that's what the soldiers would wear. Is your best boy wearing khaki? If not, don't you think he should be? What a bunch of assholes that wrote this. If he does not think that you and your country are worth fighting for, do you think he is worthy of you? What? Well, who's writing? Matt's saying, who's writing this, and how do you know How do you know how worthy the woman is of him wearing khaki? Anyway, let me just read the damn thing. I'm sorry. Don't pity the girl who is alone. Her young man is probably a soldier, fighting for her and her country and for you. Join the army today in the 2-day. What's that all about? To the young women of London. Do you think he is worthy of you? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Man, if I could have just somebody probably, some of the, what is it? The Casanovas, that after the war ended and the guys that stayed at home, and a lot of men did not come home from that bloody war that was cooked up in. It's another image or smaller sketch of what we were looking at before. And this one says, The White Feather, a sketch of English recruiting from Collier's Weekly, 1914. Collier's Weekly, a very big publication, influential publication at the time. Now, we've talked about this before. Let me get the cookies notice off. We've talked about this before, how everything is either a multi-level screw job or a multi-level conspiracy of some kind. The way these idiots do business, if you're seeing it at the first level, you're like, that's too simple. Too simple. For example, when, during a Super Bowl halftime, Katy Perry comes out riding the giant beast in the Whore of Babylon, and anybody that knows their Revelation would say, well, look at this obvious. And okay, it's when it's that simple, guys, it's not that simple. Okay, there's usually another layer of what they're trying to do. Okay, when Madonna I'm just telling you guys that I've been studying how this reality works a long time. When Madonna comes out, obviously dressed as the Baphomet, there's something else going on. It's not just a blatant ode to the Baphomet, as it seems. If you're just getting at the first level, you're not getting it. It's not how they do business. So in this area, I mean, they're going to do things in the Super Bowl halftime show coming up literally for the truth community. So you can just point and say, oh, there's a Hail Satan or whatever. That's just, okay. You understand what I'm saying. So in this regard, what would be the multi-level, or the quote back to what we talked about months ago, the triple conspiracy? Well, first off, you have at the first level that there wouldn't have been this many women stuffing in white feathers and, tracking down men walking down the streets just in their top hat and their suit. Reminds me of that scene in, is that John Cusack? Does it Say Anything, where the kid's after him the whole movie for $2? It owes him $2 for the paper route. $2. He's like after John Cusack. It's Better Off Dead, I think it's called. Better Off Dead. He's a skier. I don't think it's Say Anything. I think it's Better Off Dead. Whatever. It's not the greatest movie, but it's like the $2 kid. Some guy steps out. He's got 4 kids at home. Maybe he has a bum knee. No, they would go after everybody according to what history says. He's got a bum knee. He works a job. Well, guess what? The war effort wouldn't have been able to go on if the whole economy shut down in London. Did these white feather girls even think about that? So the guy's got 4 or 5 kids. It's not Jacob Marley and Scrooge. It's Marley was his partner. It was Bob Cratchit. Just think of that table. This guy here, Bob Cratchit, he's got 4 or 5 kids at home. He's got a Tiny Tim. He's got a bum knee. He can barely walk himself. And here come these white feather girls like running after him. And they also, they're described as attractive. So you got these old crones running after you, whatever. Like the guy would either run away or would face them and say, you try to stuff that white feather and see what happens to you. But they were used, sex sells, young women. That these, you're not fighting for you don't love your country. The shame of it all. So the multi-level thing is you have 5,000, say, women running around doing this, and I have no idea the numbers. If it wasn't for their propaganda campaign to get these women to go do it, it would have just been a smaller number, like we talked about, 500. But also, guys, here's the other level of it. Through their propaganda, and if anybody's yelling at me for this, then you should be, but I'm going to address it now. Through their propaganda, they'll make it seem like this is happening way more than it actually did. And if anybody was screaming at this presentation saying, Matt, you're falling for it, they're making it seem today that there's thousands and thousands of women running around stuffing in white feathers when there probably were very few. Absolutely, that's part of their tricks. They'll make it, but that actually ends up recruiting more white feather girls as well. They'll make it seem like everybody's doing it. Every young woman that cares about her country is stuffing white feathers. So they'll get more people doing it because of that, but ultimately the story will go down in history, or at least the history now or the history of the time is many, many thousands of women were doing this when actually they weren't. They do that as well. They do that with everything. The cigarettes, Edward Bernays get 10 debutantes in New York City to hang around Times Square smoking, and everybody says, "Oh, that's Lady Catherine. Oh, that's Samantha Reese, and oh, look at they're smoking." And it's just, they're just Edward Bernays and their cronies and the Freud cronies that have the backroom meetings. They get served by Jared and whoever controls this reality. They just shake their heads going, "I can't believe these dumb ass people fall for this first grade shit. We haven't even pulled out the sophisticated shit. We don't need to. They fall for this shit." So, guys, let's just talk. Let's just jump. And by the way, remember what Cameron said relating this to the shaming of the mask. Absolutely, they're going back to the same similar playbook there. They know what works. They've put this on populations for hundreds, if not thousands of years. They know exactly what works. And what's so scary today with the age of the internet and the supercomputer and the half sentient AI, it knows it can assess and retest thousands of times a second. It can make changes on the fly. Where this campaign, the White Feather Girl campaign, to get as many young men as possible out to get bloodied up in the trenches, they had to plan this. Now they can just probably change it up on the fly. What's not working at 9 o'clock per the Whopper supercomputer will be changed, and it will now work at 10 o'clock. 1 hour, we can change our entire strategy and philosophy on what bullshit we're pushing down on the people and what they should believe. Yeah, 1 hour we can change it up. Where in the past, during World War I, it would take 6 weeks to accomplish the same thing. So, guys, let's go over and look at the propaganda posters, because they've been doing this sort of thing a long time. The most famous are the Russian, Soviet, communist and Nazi posters. Workers of the world unite. They didn't have the internet back then. These things were very powerful and effective. This article talks about some of the people behind some of these propaganda posters and propaganda campaigns. For anybody listening, I'm just showing the old. You've seen them. You don't need to see them. Anybody listening, the old-fashioned cartoons of the person in the Hillary Clinton Mao garb. It's just a certain style of a cartoon poster that pushes communism and collectivism and Marxism, and making it seem like if you're not down with this, you ain't down with anything. They all have the same look and feel. At least, the Nazi posters and the Stalin or the communist or the Lenin or Marxist posters all have the same type feel to them. And how many more here? Like this one, if anybody, they all have this sort of feel, very blocky, red. I don't know the style. I don't know anything about art. Sorry, guys. I can't talk very intelligently about this. Here, what's this one say? Women of Britain, come into the factories. And she has her arms raised as the planes go overhead, and she's such a heroic and triumphant figure. I mean, the point here, guys, is they have the same exact playbook, but what's scary now are the tools get right into. Look at this. The tools get right. The phone. It's not like people are deciding to merge with their phone. They want to put it in their face. It's not like walking by a poster and they'll do the best they can because somebody has to walk by a poster. It would be like back in the day, people loving these posters and collect them all, like collect whatever little toy in a Happy Meal. Collect them all. People taking the posters, putting them up, and they're just walking by these posters and they were effective. Today, the people love at least the mechanism that the propaganda is being delivered. They love the phone. It's incredible. And you think in our situation, and anybody shaking their head going, how do we ever overcome this? And it is a difficult task, guys. It is a difficult task. And again, it may just be about overcoming for us. Take care, worry about yourself. By the way, I was analyzing how that should be translated. It's W-O-I, W-O-I. Worry about yourself. Worry about yourself. That's how it needs to be translated. If anybody wants to write that out, spray paint across their wall, so that's the first thing they see when they wake up in the morning, get out of bed. Oh, look who we have here, Picasso. Anybody surprised? I mean, what a absolute tool puppet of the system. No, his stuff isn't just naturally great. It was shown to people, and people were told how wonderful it is. In the end of the day, his stuff sucks. Picasso painted Guernica in response to the bomb. Oh, sure he did. Yeah, he don't work for any Chernobyl Lomonetti Control Center. He's his own man. What an absolute fraud of the system this Pablo Picasso was the stinking bridge between classically great works or whatever society Leonardo da Vinci was tied into, maybe the same society that Robert Langdon investigated in the Da Vinci Code. It doesn't matter. He still produced beautiful, beautiful things, real art. And this guy was the bridge to the crap that we see in the Modern Art Gallery of Los Angeles today. So who's this? Was this Ray Bolger? Is this the guy that starred in The Wizard of Oz? Look at this. I never saw Rosie. This is Rosie the Riveter. Strong, but feminine. I never saw Rosie depicted like this. If anybody's yelling Mandela effect, I don't blame you. I mean, are you kidding me? You could put her up against, an old wrestling, who's an old wrestler, somebody very feared, Big John Studd. In the WWF of 1989 and 92, Big John Studd was literally 6'10". This woman looks like she'd be very formidable not against Andre the Giant. He could handle himself, but maybe, Big John Studd or Jimmy Snook or something like that. I mean, look at the size of her. This is Rosie the Riveter to me. A woman that you would go to the factory, strong, whatever, but you would like to have also come home with you. I can't say that about this one, but I better be careful what I can say. So just to finish up with the White Feather Girls, these websites have these accounts. I'll summarize them for you, but just to give you an example, it says here, William Brooks was also given a white feather at age 16. Once war broke out, the situation at home became awful, because people did not like to see men or lads of army age walking about in civilian clothing or not in uniform of some sort. So there are these accounts that are, horrible in two regards. It's one thing, if you really believe in the war effort, let's just say there was a part of this movement that was somewhat legitimate. Okay, fine. Of course, they put boogeyman's on all sides. Everybody thinks the Germans are going to come get everybody, and they cook all that up. So of course you're going to, a lot of people, everybody's not going to see through. They don't know what we know now back then. Of course they're going to want people to go fight in the war because they cook up that propaganda. But it's one thing if it's a 25-year-old guy and he doesn't even have a job, to stuff a white feather in him. They catch him, doing curls, looking at himself in the mirror, completely healthy, ripped abs, 25-year-old guy, on the farm or something. Say, you need to go to the front, boy. That's one thing. But they were running after 15 and 16-year-olds. There's these accounts of the one here, age 16. And then they were running after guys that are trying to provide for their family, like a little bum knee or something, 32, 34 years old, 35. Well, yeah, okay, that's still pretty young, but still it's not, that's not, again, the Harold Faltermeyer song stresses how the average age of the combat soldier in Vietnam was 19. So should you be white-feathered women running after the 35-year-old men, and you're going to give them an examination to see if he's okay, and leave the 16-year-olds alone. Several of the accounts here talk about, and one of the common themes in the accounts, at least, or the way how this history is being presented to us, is how even the ones that didn't go off to war, were incredibly embarrassed and shamed. They didn't say to the women coming up with their white feather, you put that thing on me, I'm going to break your fingers. Touch me with, see, you touch me with that white feather. That's not just assault, honey. That's battery. You touch me, that's battery. I could be deadly allergic to that white feather, like peanut butter. That's battery. You touch me, that'll break your fingers. It doesn't talk about that in any way. Like men, it's maybe this is a continual evolution of history of a degradation of the male, of the testosterone male. The men, at least as history describes it in the accounts that I read, and I didn't research this for days or anything like that, I just took a look at several websites, but the accounts were the men were shamed, whether they were old, with a bum knee, with 4 kids at home and Tiny Tim, or the 16-year-old kids. You could see the 16-year-old kids being shamed. Some attractive 21, 25-year-old women come up. The 16-year-olds, fine, they don't know anything about the world. They were all shamed. And then there were also many accounts of these men, whether they be 16 or 30, whatever. They went in to fight, or they went in to enlist because of what these white feathered girls did. And then there are accounts of many of them not coming home, of course. Thanks a lot, white feathered girls. Appreciate it. Are you going to take in Tiny Tim now and care for him? No. So anyway, guys, it's just in terms of even the history we're being presented here through this, of course, you know what I'm going to say. You take half of it, you know how they do business, so we can kind of determine what happened here. But even the history itself in these websites or Wikipedia, it's not going to be accurate. It probably, in something like this, probably 50%. And we know we can kind of sniff the BS from what's real because we know how they do business. Thanks for listening.